Property damage, business interruption, contingent business interruption, ingress and egress coverage, civil authority coverage. These are the basic coverages that I'm going to go through today. First is the strict property damage coverage. Threshold issue. Has there been physical loss or damage to covered property? It's the first thing we want to look at when we get a claim. Well, it's likely that boats, docks, or other seaside structures, or even land owned by an insured that has been contaminated with oil will rise to the level of physical loss or damage. There must be enough oil on the property to warrant removal or be required to be removed. This is a helpful tool in determining whether there's been physical loss or damage. A few tar balls washing ashore, not necessarily physical loss or damage. A hull of a ship or an entire vessel covered in oil, well, that may rise to the level of physical loss or damage. Contamination typically equals physical loss or damage. It can constitute physical loss or damage. There's a series of cases supporting this proposition. We don't foresee any problem with finding that contamination of oil to the extent required to be removed by regulatory response or otherwise would rise to the level of physical loss or damage. But is it physical loss or damage to covered property? This is a significant threshold issue that may be the first bar to coverage under many of these property policies. Most standard personal lines policies, again, standard, not talking about broker manuscript policies, standard policies, and personal lines and commercial property policies exclude land and water from the scope of covered property. Therefore, contamination of wetlands, land, or beach may not alone constitute a covered loss for this reason. Manuscript forms may broaden the scope of coverage. Sometimes we've seen covered property in manuscript forms to be defined as any real or personal property in which an insured may have an insurable interest or for which the insured may be responsible for insurance. Applying that definition as a sample to the facts of this matter, as we've seen them, or some of the claimants and some of the claims that we expect, such a definition may be interpreted to include a lease on a section of seabed by an insured commercial fisherman, such as a shrimper or a clammer. Lots of times they'll have leases on particular areas of seabed off the seacoast, and if that seabed has been affected by oil or contaminated by oil, and there's this leasehold interest, and the manuscript policy has a provision defining covered property to include that, or to include terms that would point us to that, there you may have an issue where you have physical damage, physical loss or damage to covered property.